Welcome in. Let's turn the page. It's you only, and that's enough today. You won't believe these two books, they cracked my world wide open. Pages like little flashlights on all the parts I kept hidden.
Tonight we begin, not with urgency, not with noise, not with answers shouted across a crowded world, but with a quiet invitation. An invitation to sit gently with your own thoughts, to notice the soft rhythm of your breath, to remember that before the world asks anything of you, before you learn to strive or prove or defend, you were simply thinking, being, shaping your inner world one thought at a time. There is an old, powerful idea, simple in its language, yet immense in its influence, that says the quality of our thoughts quietly become the quality of our lives. That what we repeatedly tell ourselves, especially in moments of uncertainty or fear, does not merely comfort us or discourage us, but slowly instructs us, our nervous system, our behavior, and even our sense of what is possible. The idea has traveled through centuries under many names: faith, mindfulness, inner discipline, hope. And the modern world, one of the most recognized voices to carry this idea into everyday homes, belong to a man with a calm presence, a reassured tone, and a conviction that felt steady rather than forceful. His name? Dr. Norman Vincent Peale.
Keep it right in your head. Keep your thoughts good, not bad. Keep your thoughts decent, not indecent. Keep your thoughts full of faith and not doubt, because it is in your thoughts that is determined whether you will be happy or unhappy, whether you'll be healthy or unhealthy. The happiest person is he who thinks the happiest, most interesting, finest thoughts. And that is a fact.
Norman Vincent Peale was born 1898, at a time when the world itself seemed unsure of what it was becoming. He lived through 2 world wars, economic collapses, cultural upheaval, and technological acceleration. Yet, through all of this, his central message remains surprisingly consistent: that the human mind, when trained toward constructive belief rather than habitual fear, becomes one of the most powerful instruments for personal change. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale.
Repeated thoughts wear a kind of psychic groove in the mind, a groove that gets deeper with every repetition. You see what that means? When you think you can't, and you tell yourself you can't, and you tell other people that you can't, you've made a groove in your mind, psychically. And every time you do that, the groove becomes deeper until ultimately you can. That is the way it goes.
Peale was not a psychologist in the modern academic sense, nor was he a scientist running experiments in laboratories. He was a minister, a communicator, a student of human nature, and above all, a man deeply interested in how people cope with suffering, doubt, and the quiet despair that often goes unspoken. His famous work, The Power of Positive Thinking, published in 1952, did not arrive as a cold instruction manual. It arrived as a reassurance, as permission, as a gentle hand placed on the shoulder of the weary public. At its heart, the book proposed something both comforting and challenging: that many of the limits we experience are not imposed by circumstance alone, but reinforced by internal narratives we repeat without realizing it. Peale encouraged readers to become aware of those narratives, not to deny reality, but to meet it with a steadier inner posture. He spoke about faith, not merely as religious belief, but a confidence in the unfolding of life, confidence in one's capacity to respond rather than collapse. One of Peale's most quoted ideas, echoed across decades, is that change begins internally before it becomes visibly externally. He urged readers to practice daily moments of stillness, to visualize constructive outcomes, and to speak to themselves with encouragement rather than condemnation. In an era before neuroscience could measure brain plasticity or stress hormones, he was intuitively describing something science would later confirm. The repeated thought patterns shape emotional responses, physiological states, and decision-making habits. Peale's influence reached far beyond church walls. His sermons were broadcast on radio. His books sold millions of copies worldwide. He became a cultural figure woven into the fabric of mid-20th century America optimism. For many, his words were a lifeline during periods of loss or uncertainty. For others, they were a philosophical anchor, reminding them that despair is not the same thing as truth. Among those influences by Peale's teachings was a young man who would later become one of the most polarizing public figures of the modern era. His name, Donald Trump's family attended Marble Collegiate Church in New York, where Peale served as minister for decades. Trump has spoken publicly about Peale as a mentor figure, someone whose ideas about confidence, belief, and mental posture left a lasting impression. To understand this influence, it helps to pause judgment and instead observe the mechanism. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
Institutionalized disconfirmation. That means if you participate in an institution that institutionalizes critique and disconfirmation, then the bad ideas, the bad research gets caught and filtered out. And that's the way the academy is supposed to work. This is the genius of science. It's not that each scientist is so rational. It's that science is a community of scholars that critique each other's work. That's great. And it used to work, but it stopped working in the 90s. Here's the data. So this is a representative sample data of American professors all over the country. And as late as the mid-1990s, this is people on the left or far left. This is right or far right. These are moderates. As late as the 1990s, the left-right ratio in the academy was only 2-1. Just 2-1 left to right. But after about 15 years, this is the transformative period, mid-90s to about 2010. We have a radical change in the American professoriate. As the greatest generation and silent generation, they retire, replaced by baby boomers and Gen X. Almost everybody is on the left, because even this 5-1, this is everybody. This includes the professors in the dental school and the engineering school and the agriculture school. If you focus just on the humanities and social sciences, it varies. A new study just came out, between 17-1 and 60-1. It depends on the department. So here's my department. Here's psychology. I published a paper on this problem with some of my colleagues. We found every bit of data we could on the politics of American psychology professors. So in 1960, it was 4-1 voting Kennedy over Nixon. And then they were asked to recall who did they vote for previously. So about 2-1. So in 1960, professors were mostly Democrats, not surprising. As late as 1996, it was the same, about 4-1. But look at what happens by every measure afterwards. Whether you look at where you are left, right, or who you voted for, it shoots up. And the data that just came out last week, a new paper by Mitchell Langbert, is 17-1 for this year. So it's skyrocketing up. Very few people understand this. Very few people in this country know just how radically the professoriate has changed in the last 20 years. And what this means is that you undergrads here, you are exposed to less political diversity than ever before in the history of this country, except maybe for the 18th century when they were divinity schools. But since they became research universities, there has never been as homogeneous, as politically homogeneous a professoriate as we have this year. And it's all very, very recent. This is not a slow change. It's a very rapid change with profound consequences for everything that happens at the university.
Peale taught that doubt weakens action, while belief energizes it. That speaking confidently, even in the face of uncertainty, can reinforce inner resolve. That envisioning success primes the mind to seek opportunity rather than retreat from risk. Personality, already inclined toward assertiveness and ambition, such teachings could amplify traits that were already present. And some critics argue that this philosophy, when taken without balance, can slide into denial or overconfidence. Others suggest that it explains why certain individuals appear unshaken by criticism or resistant to self doubt. The truth, as with most human systems, exits somewhere in the middle. Ideas do not create personalities from nothing, but they can strengthen certain tendencies while softening others. And thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. And thank you to all my fans. I appreciate you so much. And please continue tuning in. Hopefully, you listen to my last episodes. What is important for us as listeners is not to evaluate a single public figure, but to recognize how belief systems quietly shape their behavior. The stories we adopt about ourselves influence how we interpret feedback, how we recover from failure, and how we justify persistence or retreat. Positive thinking, when grounded in awareness rather than avoidance, becomes less pretending everything is fine and more about choosing how we meet what is not. Decades after Peale's book was published, modern science has begun to illuminate what he sensed intuitively. Neuroscience now shows that repeated thought patterns physically reshape neural pathways. The brain does not merely record experience, it adapts to expectation. Studies in psychology and medicine consistently find correlations between optimism and resilience, between constructive self-talk and improved self-regulation, between hopeful outlooks and better long-term health outcomes. This does not mean that positive thinking cures illnesses or guarantees success. It means that the mind and body are in continuous conversation. Chronic stress floods the system with cortisol, narrowing perception and impairing immune response. Constructive emotional states, by contrast, support regulation, clarity, and recovery. In this way, thought is not magic, but it is meaningful. To deepen this understanding, it helps to place Peale's work alongside a more modern companion, a book that bridges ancient wisdom and contemporary research. That book is The Happiness Hypothesis by psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
So when I die and I think about what I've left behind, eventually it'll probably just be one metaphor. And that metaphor is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant. And the rider represents your conscious verbal reasoning, the stuff you're aware of, the stuff that uses logic. And everything else is the elephant. It's the automatic processes. It's the 99% of what's going on in your mind that you're not aware of. And I developed this metaphor in my book, The Happiness Hypothesis, and then it was made famous not by me, but by Chip and Dan Heath in their wonderful book, Switch. And what the advice boils down to is most of us spend a lot of our time trying to persuade other people's riders. We give them all these reasons. Here are the 7 reasons why you're wrong or why you should see it my way. When in fact, the way to persuade people is to speak to the elephant first. The elephant is a lot stronger than the rider. If you get somebody feeling the truth of what you're saying or feeling that they like you or like what you're saying, and the elephant kind of wants to go in your direction, then it's effortless to persuade the rider to go along. But if the elephant is digging in its heels, the elephant doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be dragged along by you to the conclusion that you're trying to get him to, then there's really nothing you can say that will persuade the rider.
And we've talked about Jonathan before on this podcast. So thank you guys. And hopefully you have checked out some of these books. Where Peale spoke in language of faith and encouragement, Haidt speaks in language of data, experiments, and cross-cultural insight. Yet they converge on a shared realization that happiness and resilience are not products of consistent pleasure, but of alignment between inner narrative and lived values. And that's a huge one. Values are important. Values form morals, and morals form your ethics. Haidt described the mind as divided, metaphorically, between a rider and an elephant. You got to check that book out. It's awesome. The rider represents continuous reasoning. The elephant represents emotion, instinct, and habit. Positive thinking, when practiced gently and consistently, is less about commanding the elephant and more about calming it, guiding it, and patience rather than force. This mirrors Peale's emphasis on reassurance over struggle, on encouragement over self attack. And that's something that all of us have to work on, that unfailing forgiveness for ourselves. What both authors suggest in these books, in their own ways, is that lasting change occurs when we stop treating ourselves as adversaries and begin relating to ourselves as partners. When the inner voice becomes supportive rather than punitive, the nervous system relaxes, creativity opens, and resilience strengthens. And resilience is important to get through life because it's a tough life no matter where you're at. This is not a denial of pain, it is a way of staying present without it being consumed, pretty much. And as we move deeper into this episode, we will explore these ideas, show up and how they show up in modern research, how gratitude practices measurably affect sleep and mood, how visualization influences motivation circuits in the brain, and why small daily routines of kindness towards oneself create cumulative emotional strength. We will also explore the limits of positive thinking, the importance of realism, and why compassion must always accompany optimism. For now, simply notice your own inner tone. Notice how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. Notice whether your thoughts feel like a refugee or a battleground. There is no need to change anything yet. Awareness alone is a form of kindness. This is only the beginning. So let's begin. If you're listening to this, there is nothing you need to do, no insight you need to grasp immediately, no lesson you need to apply perfectly. The body learns best when it is not being rushed, and the mind settles when it feels it is not being evaluated. Allow this to simply arrive. The way sound does, the way breath does, without effort. Two very different books approach the human experience from opposite sides of the same truth. One begins with belief and moves inward toward the body. The other begins with the body and moves outward towards belief. When these perspectives meet, something important happens. The pressure to think correctly dissolves, and what replaces it is a quieter understanding of how humans actually heal. And each of us need to heal in some kind of way. One of the most reliable findings across psychology, neuroscience, and medicine is that the body is not healed by force, it is healed by regulation. Regulation is not the absence of difficulty, it is the presence of enough internal safety to allow repair to occur. Thoughts play a role in this, not because they are magical, but because they act as signals. Every repeated thought teaches the nervous system what to prepare for. When a thought suggests danger, even subtly, the body prepares for survival. Muscles tighten, digest slows, immune resources shift towards defense. When this happens, occasionally the system recovers. When it happens continuously, the system adapts by staying alert. This is how emotional patterns become physical strains over time. The first book approaches this gentle but true suggestion of what we repeatedly expect influences what the body braces for. It does not ask the reader to deny pain or ignore reality. It asks something much simpler and much harder: to notice when the mind is rehearsing threat unnecessarily. To notice when internal language is harsher than the situation requires. And that's something I have learned along the way in my healing journey. To notice when my internal language is harsher than the situations before me, and the internal language is from my caretakers in the beginning of my life. The second book supports this with research that shows how emotional appraisal shapes psychological response. It explains that the same event can produce entirely different bodily outcomes depending on interpretation. This is not about optimism versus pessimism. It is about meaning. Meaning doesn't determine whether the nervous system mobilizes temporarily or remains stuck in anticipation. So, audience, one of the most overlooked insights supported by both books is that healing accelerates when the mind stops arguing with experience. And I think that comes from maturity. Because a lot of people live on impulse and they don't realize they need to become mature more to not live on impulse. And resistance creates tension. Tension prolongs stress. Stress interrupts repair. Acceptance, by contrast, reduces friction, period. This does not mean approval. It means allowing the body to process without interference. And in today's society, some of us, we just don't ever get that time to have that time. And there is a common misconception that positive thinking requires convincing oneself of something that does not feel true. But in reality, the most effective mental shifts are often smallest and most believable. Research consistently shows that moderate, compassionate reframing is more regulating than extreme affirmations. The nervous system responds best to thoughts that feel safe rather than grand or, exciting. A thought like, I can't handle this, increases psychological load. A thought like, this is difficult and I am here with it, reduces it. The difference is not semantic, it is biological. One signals abandonment, the other signals presence. Presence is what allows the body to settle. And that's why I tell you about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I see 5 things, I name them, I smell 4 things, I touch 3 things, I taste 2 things, and it brings me back into the present. So both of these books, in their own ways, point towards this principle. The mind's role is not to control the body, but to create conditions in which the body does not feel threatened by itself. This is why self-criticism is so costly. And I'm serious, listen to this. It keeps the stress response active long after the original change has passed. So it's similar to alcohol. You have a night out, that night out is in your system for 4 to 5 weeks after that, clouding your judgment. Studies on self-compassion show measurable decreases in inflammation markers, improvements in heart rate variability, and better emotional recovery after stress. These effects occur not because self-compassion eliminates difficulty, but because it prevents secondary suffering. The body can carry pain, like in our last episode. The body keeps the score. What exhausts it is being attacked while doing so. Another shared insight is that certainty is not calming. Flexibility is. The brain relaxes when it knows it has options. Rigid beliefs, even positive ones, can increase anxiety because they collapse when reality does not cooperate. Flexible beliefs adapt. They bend without breaking. This is why the most healing mindset is not everything will work out, but I will adjust as things unfold. That belief supports resilience. It keeps the nervous system engaged without overwhelming it. Research on psychological flexibility shows that this capacity predicts low anxiety, lower depression, and better physical health outcomes over time. So, when you're formulating your decisions, remember, create an option at the end of your decision that your brain believes is an out, so then it reduces cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, stuff like that. The body responds especially well to beliefs that allow rest. Rest is not merely physical stillness, you guys. It is cognitive permission to stop scanning for danger. When the mind releases its grip, even briefly, the body uses that window to repair tissue, regulate hormones, and recalibrate immune functions. And that's super important for living a life of longevity. One of the quieter truths supported by modern research is that healing does not happen during effort. It happens during pauses. That's why I talk about pause, take a breath. Those are important. Remember that pause. The books we are talking about here, one encourages moments of mental stillness, the other explains why those moments matter. Stillness activates restorative systems. Without it, even healthy behaviors lose effectiveness. Meaning also plays a crucial role in healing. So, pain experienced without meaning feels endless. And that's why there's so much suffering going on in the world. Pain placed with a coherent narrative becomes more tolerable. Give yourself an out. Relieve your own stress. This does not require spiritual belief. It requires orientation, everybody. When the mind understands what it is moving towards, the body tolerates strain more effectively. And you can see this with physical therapists or people training for the Olympics. They have people that are specialists in these areas. Neuroscience shows that meaning activates reward and integration networks in the brain, reducing perceived threat. This is why people endure difficult rehabilitation, chronic illness, or emotional loss more effectively when they feel their experience fits into a larger story of growth, care, and connection. The first book frames this as faith. The second frames it as value alignment. The language differs, the mechanisms are the same. When experience makes sense, the nervous system relaxes. It is also important to understand what these books do not suggest. They do not suggest ignoring medical care. They do not suggest blaming oneself for illness. They do not suggest that suffering is a failure of thought. In fact, both perspectives implicitly reject blame by emphasizing systems over morality. The body is not broken because it suggests struggles. It is responding as it was designed to respond. Healing begins when the environment, internal and external, become supportive rather than demanding. If you notice tension as you listen, there is no need to release it. Simply notice is enough. Just noticing is enough. Simply noticing is enough. Awareness itself begins regulation. The body feels less alone when it is witnessed without judgment. A simple research-supported practice is to pair awareness with permission. Permission is not surrender, it is cooperation. A sentence like, I am allowed to take this moment, signals safety. Safety invites repair. These books, when read together, are not instructions for self-improvement. They are reminders of self-relationship. What we mean to ourselves. We should be positive to ourselves. Why are we beating ourselves up? We're the only person that has to live with ourselves on the inside of ourselves forever. So, as you return to this read, think about your future. Let it be the background rather than the task. Let it accompany you rather than instruct you. Healing rarely arrives through effort alone. And fan members, more often, it arrives quietly, when the system finally feels safe enough to exhale. And if all this does is slow you down a fraction, soften you a little, or help you feel less at war with yourself, that is not small. That is where repair begins.